Alrighty. Hello, everybody. Welcome to PIO Playbook Training Series. For those of you who are just joining us, we're going to be doing Module 9, which is Engaging Social Media Influencers, which is probably the module I've been looking most forward to. But having said that, please take it away, Tasha.
All right, awesome. Welcome back, everybody. As Anthea said, we're going to go through an overview of best practices and strategies for using social media influencers to convey your agency's message. And so with that, we'll go ahead and get started. All right, so our learning objective today is to give you some perspective on whether or not you should be using social media influencers as a tool to amplify your agency's key messages. The information presented today will help you decide, whether it's an appropriate strategy for your agency. Not every agency wants to wade into the field of engaging social media influencers. So the key questions we want you to think about today for this module is whether you think engaging social media influencers is going to be beneficial to your agency's overall narrative. And then just taking a look as we're going through some of the best practices, see if you think some of these best practices could be used in your agency to engage social media influencers. So what are social media influencers? So really, a social media influencer is a person who has established credibility in a specific industry. So for example, transportation, and that person has access to a very large audience and can persuade other people to act based on their recommendation. An influencer has the tools and the authenticity to attract many viewers on a consistent basis. And like I said, they motivate others and their followers to take action based on what they recommend. So we're going to go through today the 4 types of influencers. There's mega, macro, micro, and nano, and we'll give you an overview of each of those. And we want you to think of the influencers like you would traditional media. They do have a solid audience of readers and people who read their content, and they can promote your agency in a way that enhances the overall brand. We also always like to recommend that agencies, if they're going to do this, spend time creating a solid roster of influencers that you can trust and count on. And that takes time and extensive research. And we'll talk a little bit about some techniques and strategies to help you do that as an agency. Okay, so what type of social media influencers are there out there? Okay, so there's the mega influencer. So mega influencers, you can basically think of them as celebrities. They've got millions of followers on all of their social networking platforms. They usually have come off some sort of, celebrity status, whether they've made a movie or they play sports, whatever it is. They are in that mega category, and their services are going to be costly. So most of these mega influencers charge anywhere from $500,000 to $1 million per post. And they're most likely going to be very selective about who they work with, and they probably have an agent. So most, public sector agencies are not going to go towards working with the mega influencer, but they are out there and they are at the top of the food chain when it comes to social media influencers overall. Macro influencers are one step down from the mega influencer, and those are, they're a little bit more accessible to your agency as marketers. You would consider a macro influencer anybody who's got a following between, let's say, 40,000 to 1 million followers on a social media network is usually considered to be a macro influencer. Then we've got our micro influencers, and this is also another accessible route for agencies to take. So these are ordinary, everyday people, and they've become known because they have a lot of knowledge in a specific niche topic. So whether that's transportation, lifestyle, whatever it is, these people have really established their credibility on that one particular topic. So it's very, very focused. And so what they've been able to do is gain a sizable social media following because people are interested in the niche that they're talking about. And so for the micro influencer, that would be anybody who's got a following between, let's say, 1,000 and 40,000 followers on any single social media platform could be considered a micro influencer. And then we've got are nano influencers. So these are the newest category of influencer. They're gaining a lot of recognition. And these are people who have a small number of followers, but they tend to be viewed as experts in a specialized field. So they usually have fewer than 1,000 followers, but the followers that they do have are dedicated, interested, willing to engage, and they listen to this influencer with the intent to take action on whatever that influencer recommends. So the nano influencers are still very important because the quality of their followers, getting them to take an action or consume content, is there, although they don't have millions of followers. So that's a little bit of a breakdown of the four different types of social media influencers that we're going to be talking about and that exist out in the world. Okay. So let's do a little statistical snapshot of how social media, has become integrated in every part of our lives. And influencer marketing has exploded. So it is a tactic that we recommend that public agencies consider just to take a look at whether or not it can be beneficial. So a couple statistics here: 70% of teens trust social media influencers more than they trust actual celebrities. 4 in 10 millennials say that their favorite social media influencer understands them better than their friends. 49% of consumers say that they depend on social media influencer recommendations to make a purchase or take an action. And there's been research conducted that shows that social media influencer marketing campaigns earn $6.50 for every dollar that's actually spent. So it's actually an avenue that can really, if done correctly and used correctly with the right influencers, it really can amplify your overall communications efforts for your agency. Few other statistics here. In 2020, the social media influencer market hit more than $10 billion worldwide. And it's not to say that you have to pay for every single post. That's usually how it works, but there's other arrangements that you can make. And social media influencer marketing has actually surpassed print marketing. And most marketers who represent either a public or private corporation or agency say that they plan to dedicate at least $25,000 to $50,000 in their overall communications budgets for influencer marketing. So now it's becoming a line item in marketing plans to use social media influencers. And 71% of marketers say that partnerships and building these partnerships with social media influencers has been good for business and is good for business going forward. So when you're looking at whether or not your government agency should partner with a social media influencer, remember that communicating as a government or a public entity and marrying that with social media outreach can be a very complex process because you have certain things that you're required to say, certain things that you're required to do, and you have to be very strategic in how you actually engage these influencers. If you haven't engaged with an influencer as an agency in the past, it's really important to do your due diligence before doing so. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But one of the things that, we really recommend that public agencies consider is, if you're going to use a social media influencer, what is it going to be for? Thinking about the purpose. Okay, are you going to use them to promote a project? Are you promoting an initiative? Do you just want them to, give a quick shout out to your agency? You have to be really strategic in how you're in the specific purpose that you're going to use these influencers for. We also recommend that you review the past 36 months of a prospective influencer's social media posts. You don't want to be in a situation where you, as a government agency or a public entity, you engage a social media influencer and somebody found out that 2 years ago they made a questionable post on their Twitter feed, and now that's coming back to haunt them, so now they're in hot water, and they could take you along with them in that, and people will start looking at them based on that tweet from 2 years ago. So you really want to have a thorough look at what have they posted and is it in line with your agency's communication standards. We also recommend that agencies beware of bartering and policies around in-kind or trade services. So a lot of times, a social media influencer will say, hey, I'll talk about your event if I get, 2 free tickets, or, I'll give you this if you give me that, some sort of in-kind trade. So you have to be really careful if you're going to engage a social media influencer, think about it as the same as like placing an ad in a newspaper or buying airtime on the radio. You need to create a contract, set deliverables, set deadlines for the content that they're either going to produce for you or share, and include measures for accountability on the part of the influencer. So you don't want to ever be in a situation where, you know, an influencer promised you certain things and you don't get it because there was no accountability established when you first went to engage with this particular influencer.
Yeah, and one thing to keep in mind, Tasha, is definitely do your homework. I know that within the small business community, there's a lot of businesses that have actually reached out to influencers by way of doing certain things and never did their due diligence, their homework. So they wanted them to actually promote a product that they had. And when they came to find out, and we did some of the research, you know, to your point, Tasha, there were sort of some questionable things that they had done. Come to find out that what they were saying that they actually were doing, that they had made up all of these things. So I think that that's one of the main things that you have to definitely do, especially if this is a new platform or area that you feel would be ideal to market your organization or to educate your stakeholders. Definitely do your due diligence and just research and make sure that you identify the person that you are actually getting in and creating that relationship with. Going back to what we talked about, you know, journalism and so forth, a lot of the social media influencers are and may not be real journalists. So you have to be very cautious of what it is that you may want to do moving forward.
Right. And remember that you've taken so much time to build your agency's reputation and your agency's brand. So you want to make sure you are engaging with social media influencers that are in line with everything that your organization stands for. And due diligence is one of the quickest and easiest ways to figure out, you know, is there alignment here, or do we need to move on and look at another influencer for a particular engagement? And then, so, you know, a lot of times when governments are using social media, and Hootsuite came out with some interesting statistics about this, they use it more as a digital notice board to just put out notices. This meeting is happening. This is going on. So Hootsuite reported that 85% of government agencies and governments that are active on social media are really just putting out notices of meetings, deadlines, reports, and things like that. So if that's the way that your agency uses social media currently, and you're going to engage a social media influencer, you need to really go beyond that by strategically using the influencers to tell your story. So do things like a day in a life interview with a particular influencer to introduce that person to your followers on the agency side. Have the influencer go behind the scenes on one of your transportation projects, or share video footage of them engaging with you and your agency, and have them put that out on their social media feeds. Engaging an influencer to promote an upcoming agency event and give them, you know, exclusive access is another really great way to just get your feet wet as an agency working with a particular influencer. Give them that behind the scenes access to something and see how it goes, and always be open to trying new things, you know, just trying one or two things. It doesn't have to be this huge overall strategy. Maybe you start with one social media influencer that you followed for a long time and you think this person's content is good and it aligns with your agency. Try a small engagement for one or two things, an event, an interview, something like that, and just see how it goes and build on that relationship if it goes well. Okay. And then use social media influencers to humanize your agency. So for example, if the Broward MPO staff is out doing volunteer work to support a charitable cause, why don't you invite the influencer along, the influencer that you're targeting for a possible engagement, invite that person along to be part of it. Why have them catch your team in action, helping the community and doing all these great things, and see how that goes in terms of coverage. And then getting conversational with your constituents. So not everything that you're putting on social media needs to be stuffy or corporate. And when you're dealing with social media influencers, they don't usually do the corporate stuffy type of tone with what they're doing on their feed. So instead, think about engaging an influencer and poll 10 of your followers to see what do you think about this particular influencer's work? See what people are commenting on. Get your followers directly involved in a conversation by using a social media influencer as a facilitator. So for example, if you have an issue that you're working on, you're trying to build a bridge between your current audience and a new audience, and a social media influencer really has a gateway into that particular audience that you're trying to engage, use them to facilitate a conversation on social media. It could be just a quick, 10 questions, 5 questions, whatever it is. Create a video of that, put that on social media, and see how that resonates with your followers. Okay. And then 3 things that you can do today to start with influencer marketing. First, of course, we keep mentioning this, do your research, whether it's the media or a social media influencer. You've got to do your research and make sure who you know who is working in that particular space. Don't approach social media influencers that have nothing to do with what your agency does. And understand what they post about and get that target list going. Then when you have the list, start small. We talked about how important it is and how much better it is to have a small targeted list of media. You can do the same thing with influencers. Have a small targeted list. Start with just 5 influencers in the space that your agency works in. Develop ideas to engage with them. Reach out and then measure the results of that engagement. Myra was talking earlier about using hashtags to find things that she wants to cover on social media. When you engage with a social media influencer, use a hashtag that's unique to whatever you're doing with that particular influencer. If it's an interview, if it's a video, whatever it is, give it a unique hashtag and see how their followers respond. See how that hashtag performs over time, the time that you've engaged them. These are really simple things that you can do today to get started with, making sure that you are engaging social media influencers if that's where your agency wants to go. Or if not, at least you have a really good framework so that you can work with identifying social media influencers. Because even if you're not going to use them to do any kind of paid engagement or any, major initiative with your agency, it's always good to know who the social media influencers are in your space, because you can use them to do simple things like, comment on your posts, share content with them, whatever it is. It doesn't have to be this huge overall strategy where you're bringing in all these social media influencers to promote one thing. You can start small. And even if you don't want to put dollars towards paying social media influencers, it's still a good idea to know who they are, because you just never know when you might need to use them in the future. And so with that, I will go ahead and open it up for questions. We do have a couple prompt questions on the screen here that we can use to open the conversation. 1, do you think your agency should be engaging with social media influencers? What are the pros and cons that you see from your point of view? And then, are there any social media influencers that you've been following that come to mind for a future engagement? And do you see any value in engaging social media influencers for your agency? So with that, I'll go ahead and open it to questions. Let's see what we have in the chat. Now, Anthea, I'm sure you probably have a question as it relates to social media influencers.
Yeah, actually, I have a comment. I can definitely tell you something about that 3rd bullet.
Yep.
Definitely value in engaging with them. I know, Stephanie, this is something that you and I have been trying to, and Hannah as well, have been trying to work on over the past couple of years with our Complete Streets events. I know there's a gentleman in Fort Lauderdale. He goes by the Urban Planner. We've been in communication with him. He's super interested in our mobility hub. So we've been in communication with him about that. Chadwick has given us some really great information to give to him that he has given to his followers and things of that nature. And he actually approached us first, which was really awesome. Seeing us as kind of like an authority on that subject. So is there value in it? Absolutely. Hannah's got there's some other things in the chat as well that are coming in from Jad and Hannah. I don't know if you want to go over that as well, Tasha.
Yes, so a couple other influencers that you guys pointed out. Hannah just pointed out Lauder Babe. as an influencer, and Jad brought up that there are some transportation and planning YouTube channels where there are influencers who run those channels that might be interesting to reach out to. And so, Anthea, you were saying you're currently working with some of those people. So is it a small list? It sounds like it's a small list of people that you're working with now as social media influencers.
Yeah, it's a niche list, only because you know, a lot of people are maybe interested in talking about like congestion and like traffic and things of that nature. He's really into more of the mobility parts of it, which really fits quite nicely with the Complete Streets program. So those are some of the things that he shared on his channels. You know, on our behalf, we don't have a formalized partnership with him yet because we're still in the due diligence phase of making sure that we can get you know, him to interact with us and things of that nature. But he's a big one that that's like kind of like our big little fish. He's like a micro influencer. He's very popular locally. But his thing really is downtown Fort Lauderdale and the way that it's developing and changing for the better. And that transportation fits really nicely into those topics he covers. So I know Lauder Babe that Hannah mentioned is somebody that we've been seeking to, especially with our virtual events, we were seeking to get her involved with that. So we've reached out to her, but again, seeing from this training that, you know, you have to do that due diligence first. That was like a cold call to her. And I think that's probably what, there has to be more behind it before we actually like are able to like get on board with her.
Absolutely. And one other thing I just wanted to mention, it wasn't on any of our slides, but we do always recommend this. So we talked about how as an agency employee, whether you're a PIO or not, you are always representing your agency. So even if you are engaging with a social media influencer personally, and it relates to whatever you're doing, like for example, traffic congestion. So you may have your own personal opinions on that. And so you put things, you know, you post comments and all of that. You're not doing it in your official capacity as an employee of the Broward MPO. But what we like to always remind agencies is that you're really always, when you're in social media, you're really always representing your agency. So just be careful of the things that you post when you're interacting with a particular influencer, especially if it's in the same space as what your agency does. So for example, if there's a conversation about traffic congestion going on and you know, maybe you say something and it's off the top of your head, you didn't think about it. Maybe there's some choice words in there that you probably wouldn't have used, you know, normally. Just think about before you post, hey, if someone from my agency were to see this, you know, or this social media influencer were to work with my agency one day and knows I work there, maybe I should have rethought that post. So we always like to just, you know, remind people that even when engaging with social media influencers and you're off the clock, you're always representing your agency. So just be really careful of what you post when you're doing that kind of engagement on a personal level.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to add, Tasha, is the same way that you can actually reach out to them, a lot of them will actually reach out to you as well. I know that I've had some social influencers, you know, reach out to me to speak or talk, you know, on their YouTube channel, or talking about, you know, government contracting or anything related to small business. And I think that that's why it's extremely important for any content, any information, to Myra's point, that your website is up to date and has content and information that can definitely be shared, but that they can actually reach out. So even if, let's say right now you're in that stage where you're actually talking to Lauder Babe and a couple of other, you know, social influencers, also keep in mind that what you need to do also is make sure that as you start building that relationship with them, that you also have something tangible to give to them, because they may be reaching out to you before you actually reach out to them.
Yep, absolutely. I saw, Anthea, that you put in the social media terms of use for the Broward MPO. Thank you for that. That goes to our last point of just always remembering that you're always representing your agency. It's just one of the, I guess we could say, perks of working for a public agency, is that you are always representing it. So with that, if there are no other questions, we can go ahead and take a break before the last module of our training, which is module 10. So Anthea, let me know what you want to do.
Yeah, so just one last, I guess, antidote before we go to that break. I remember there was a really good example of that. When I first started at the MPO, the Wave streetcar was still like a thing.
Yeah.
And so I recall showing up to a commission meeting in the city of Fort Lauderdale. I was a new resident at that time. And I remember they were passing out these support shirts. And I couldn't exactly wear the shirt because everybody knows that I'm all over the MPO social media channels. And so if I do show up to a commission meeting in support of something, though I can, it's a fine line, because you also want to show support for something that you voted for, but at the same time, my agency wants me to be there on behalf of the agency. And so, you just always have to be mindful of those different things. I put the social media terms of use in there because it not only covers professional use on behalf of the agency, but it also covers your personal use. So you guys have a look at that on the first page, especially those of you that are new to the team. Just make sure that what you're doing on social media is in line with what's going on with the agency terms of use. So having said that, I think we can take another 5-minute break before we move into the last segment.